G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day and importantly a fantastic Friday leading into what I hope is a great weekend. Maybe go and have a beer with your mates. Now today, as always, we have a lot to go over. We're going to talk about China and Russia, what partnership is going on there. Is there lethal aid? Is there not? We'll look at some official statements. We need to talk about new kit we're seeing and successful strikes we've seen as well and claimed strikes as well. We're going to look at the map, so we're going to look at geolocations. We have a lot of mapping to go over as well as some opinion strategy off the front line of a dear friend of mine, but of course an anonymous source there speaking about tactics, what we're seeing and why we're seeing some successes in some direction. But first off the bat, let's have a look at some of the losses. And this is my kits and strikes folder here. So we have now another Su-25 claimed to be downed by Ukraine. Now some pages are actually saying then this was two, but the warriors from the 110th Mech Brigade destroyed a Su-25 fighter in the Donetsk region here. And the video given by that is then this. So burning in a field well far away, we can't really see what has actually occurred there. Now, this claim is actually bringing it now to 6 for this month, which it is getting hard to believe when there's no evidence provided for any of these. Now, I can understand limited footage of long-range strategic aircraft, a long way away, very high, well over occupied territory. But due to the nature of a Su-25, they typically fly very low and on or behind the front line. It is very questionable to not then get any of this days on, weeks on, months on. And this is drawing a lot of similarities to the 10 Su-34s that were claimed to be down in 10 days 2 months ago, of which we got no evidence for those either. And then since then, we haven't seen any of those down either. If you take down 10 in 10 days, few months on, you'd think some of those would be coming down. So I really think it's in absolutely Ukraine's interest to try and supply evidence as soon as possible with these claims, because people are looking at this very similar to the boy who cried wolf. Now, let's have a look at a Ukrainian successful confirmed strike by ATACMS in the Donetsk Oblast against this airfield down here. So you can see, we'll zoom out exactly where this is. So we have Donetsk City here, and some other areas of which I'm sure you'll be familiar with, such as Mariinka, Krasnoyarivka, these areas. Now, what has actually been taken out here? Well, there's a little bit of difference in what it may have been, but we can confirm this 96L6E radar has been taken out, and control station as well, that these are either S3 or S400 launches, and we have a video here as well showing the aftermath, the damage of what has occurred here, and said, this is a launcher here, said that there will be then casualties from this as well, which would be unsurprising for a typically manned system there. But there are people saying it's S3 or S400. Now, this does make a large difference on how important of a strategic target this is. Yes, S3 and S400 is a large strategic target. No one wants to lose that and people want to hit that. But there is a large difference between hitting this, that there are it's far cheaper of S300 than S400 batteries. Now, rightfully, some members did point out that typically Russia deploy the more expensive, more important and harder to make S400 systems inside either Russian territory or down in Crimea, where there are significantly more strategic targets, and inside other occupied areas are still using then S300 systems. So pointing at this likely then is an S300 system. That said, that isn't concrete evidence. It's just what we've seen before and adding that to this. But that is very interesting to speak about, and an air defense system being taken out at an air base, never a good look, because, well, you've got that operating right where it should be, as we've seen in both ways. Now, yesterday we did look at, and the day before, this new Sea Baby bloody Grad MLRS rocket drone here with these 6 unguided rockets aboard it, and we did question of how accurate would this actually be. You've got a small light craft on unstable water firing rockets, which are going to affect a small craft like that. Yeah, firing a rocket launcher off a Navy warship may not have much effect, but firing a rocket of this will have an effect, especially if it's going at then different times and the water's doing this. We questioned how accurate that will be. Well, the SBU released this video today. Of course, this is footage of these in kamikaze roll, then going towards ships, but we get our answer to then the accuracy. As we can see, when they fire off here, and we get multiple spud into the water very close to the drone then itself. Right here, this one skips off the water there, as well as another one, I believe, too. So what actually is this? What effect will this have? Well, unguided rockets just into the abyss like this, well, probably very little as far as directly targeting things. People have questioned before the use of the helicopters with the unguided rockets pulling up, the planes pulling up unguided, although the planes, people are saying, would be more accurate because you're traveling more linear than, say, a chopper like this. But you can just see this drone and how it is moving in the water, as you can see, left to right here, and bobbing as well, of how inaccurate that system would be. So what exactly is this? Well, I would say these rockets wouldn't have much effect on how the craft moves in the water, and wouldn't be that heavy to take away from how much bang is actually in this. So some are saying, could this be like a last attack method, that if you can't find a target to hit with the drone and you're running out of signal or fuel to just launch these off as a Hail Mary, is it used as a distraction for if a chopper's in the air, say, trying to hit this, and these come off, you're probably going to pull up on the stick and get out of the way. What's the actual chance of being hit? Limited, but it's more than not having it, I guess. So, look, I don't know. Is one of these unguided rockets going to take down a warship? No. Will the bang in this? Obviously, as we've seen. So, I don't know. I think potentially it is a reaction to the maybe the counters to now these drones that we've seen Russia be more successful actually targeting these. We have videos of them being targeted, maybe from sitting back, but I'm leaning more towards maybe a last chance thing and maybe a distraction and sort of recon by fire, but I don't really know. But we know definitely highly, highly inaccurate, unlike the heat-seeking missiles we have seen then aboard these. This is what really we want. We want Toyota 70 Series Land Cruisers with MLRS on them. But we have had more ATACMS being launched, up to 8 towards Crimea. Well, last night, but today here, if you're running on Australian time. We don't know yet the effect of these. We do know Ukraine recently has been very effective with ATACMS, both down in Crimea and in Donetsk, obviously from the S3 or 400 system, which we just saw. But we have had a lot of reports of ATACMS going out within a few days on, no reports of any damage too. So we do know these can be jammed. And we do know areas like Crimea are going to have far more air defense coverage than other areas on the front line. And with systems like this, you typically have a short window of when it is effective. So I think Ukraine's making the absolute most of that while they can. So what is being hit there? Well, we will, I guess, wait and see. So we speak a little bit about FABs and how that has really changed things in the front line. The word game changer is thrown around and is, you know, nothing is a complete game changer. There's no such thing as Wunderwaffens, except nuclear weapons that change, you know, I guess, strategic outlay of countries and people's willingness to attack. But in conventional war, there is no such thing as a Wunderwaffen, and you can lose a war chasing then a miracle weapon. But in the last, well, this year, I will say, the biggest effect on the ground of any weapon system, both Ukrainian or Russian, has been Russia's glide bombs. They have them in numerous numbers. They're relatively very cheap. They've got, as I said, a lot of them and can be dropped then well behind the line in 30, 40 kilometers. And with the basic guidance systems we have seen can actually be very accurate on target and dropping multiple of them. And because they can have such a big bang, 500, 1500 kilograms, it has having a morale effect too. But we have spoken about these, and this is the first footage I've actually seen of these UMPBs, but we have seen some of them on the ground and the little engines. Frontline Su-34 bomber drops UMPB glide bombs on Ukrainians in Kharkiv. Unlike standard FABs, your UMPC, this bomb has its own engine and is capable of covering much greater distances, which allows it to reach, for example, Kharkiv. So the typical glide bombs, of course, depends on the speed and angle and height of the Su-35, and of course a bunch of other factors, but people are speaking, depending on the type, 30 to 40 kilometers. So we do know that there are ones landing in areas like Kramatorsk. Of course, these assisted massively in the taking of Avdiivka, and we have, of course, reports into Kharkiv. But Well, the biggest threat with this is you want to take down the aircraft, not the bomb. The bomb in the air is too expensive to be hitting with air defense due to how many of them are being dropped. These are cheap. Air defense is expensive. Lots of these, not much air defense. You want to be striking the plane. But as we're about to say, the further the plane is back, the harder that is going to be, very obviously. So when these had, say, 40 kilometers of range, that the plane was right on the border to strike Kharkiv. With the UMPB, with the rocket assist, I've heard from 50 to 60 kilometers. So it might put you another 20 Ks back in safety. Now, one of the big parts about this is with Western air defense, we are still unsure the ruling on actually striking, depending on the country, a Russian aircraft in Russian airspace. So, of course, it puts it back in a level of safety. Would you rather be on the border or 20 Ks behind? And, of course, it's just extending range of what can be hit of Kramatorsk, Sloviansk areas and extending the range on those cheap bombs with some guidance aboard them. And we have this video, the first video I've actually seen of these, then said to being dropped here. So this is Su-34. You can tell by the side-by-side seating, like an F-111, and the duck face nose on this aircraft. We can see he's dropped them. You see the aircraft do like a little bit of a jiggle up and down because it's just unloaded a couple of tons of weight. And then you'll see the wings then pop out there. I believe these are spring-loaded, so they're held closed up, and as they drop, they then come out. And now you can't see the rockets fire off. That's what I would really like to see, but it's said to be that from a Su-34 off their way there. And you can tell the altitude that a plane like this is, and he'll be making that hard bank full throttle to get then back out of the danger zone. People are saying that these aircraft will spend 60 to 90 seconds actually in the bubble of where they can be hit. Of course, they come in much slower. Drop them, we presume, subsonic. There's a lot of problems dropping munitions supersonic. You can look that up online, and tails being taken out and all sorts of shit. But subsonic, make a hard bank and then boost it out of the danger area as soon as possible. So that is very interesting to look at. I'll just show you on this. I'll show the photos in the background, but you can see a different nose to a typical fab, and at the end, like the cone of where that small rocket motor, just to give it a little bit more oomph, will actually be. So let's look at the maps. Let's look at some geolocation. So, of course, here's Ukraine, the center. Here's the capital of Kyiv. The red areas occupied since 22, the purple since 14, and the green areas of which Russia has been and has either been pushed out of or has withdrawn from areas. Now, we're going to talk about up in the north, but what I want to speak about first is what one of my friends, great guy, incredibly experienced on the ground, is saying about what he's sort of seeing and tactics as well. As I believe this stuff is very, very important. And he, not in one of these messages, but said to me, I hope someone will actually see you and listen to what I'm bloody saying, because I don't know what else to do. I've been pondering over what the Russians' next move is. As you'll know very well, with Russians, you can't say or think with our methodology and training mindset, what would I do next? You have to look at how they have operated historically. People with zero knowledge of warfare, and especially those flag wavers that have never set foot in Ukraine, will argue and even hurl abuse at this. I never listen to that noise. Remember Kyiv. I'm absolutely of the belief that Russia had zero intention to take Kyiv. At a push, surround it. To take it would have taken up way too many reserves. What they did do was keep Ukrainian resources around the city. Russia's primary goal was to take the land bridge from the west of Rostov-on-Don and link into Crimea. They also knew full well that as of due to the farcical political tiptoeing in the US would not be resupplied. So let's look at where he was talking about. So a push in on Kyiv to tie up resources here and to want to push from Rostov down to create in the south of Ukraine this land bridge through to Crimea instead of Kerch here. And of course, as of in Mariupol down here. This continues. That'll be important. People have argued with me saying they already had a land bridge, which is laughable. A bridge, the Kerch, most certainly is not a reliable land bridge. And the distance between even the shortest point, minus the bridge, is 5 kilometers. Remember back when the Russians agreed to move out of Kyiv and said they will instead reinforce the east. They did that knowing they'd won that land bridge and Mariupol. This continues. I genuinely feel the Battle of Kharkiv will be the same. They'll attempt to surround Kharkiv or make it seem that way, but the majority of attacks will be by air, artillery, and missile. The position of actual fighting itself, though, won't change that much. Their intention is to take Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. Now let's have a look at where Sloviansk and Kramatorsk, of course we have Donetsk Oblast here, we have Bakhmut, Kramatorsk, Sloviansk, the biggest areas in this oblast that are not then occupied. We're talking Kharkiv up here to give a bit of ground of where we are. An area they were in 2014, and they'll play the same games as they have since day one. Up and down border where Ukraine has made the same mistake over and over again. Stay in the center to hold ground and allow themselves to be surrounded. Mariupol, Severodonetsk, Lysychansk, Bakhmut, Avdiivka. Now this is similar to what I spoke about in yesterday's video from another source, saying that holding ground and getting surrounded has been happening again and again over a certain amount of time. That fighting, we don't have the manpower or resources to be doing that. You may need to give up ground for time, hit logistics, and then move back. Yes, the optics of losing ground, can be bad, but that he was saying in yesterday's, not this guy, but Ukraine's too focused on the optics of losing territory rather than the actual strategic influence of having then a fighting withdrawal and hitting areas, but sacrificing some land that you will then take back at some point. And then this is happening in these areas which we've seen. Napoleon was wrong when he said one must change one's tactics every 10 years if one wishes to maintain one's superiority. It's battle by battle because those Russian leopards aren't changing their spots. They're using the same tactic because Ukraine allows them to get away with it. So they're using the same tactics, like in Mariupol of being surrounded, like in Bakhmut of being surrounded and having to withdraw, like Avdiivka, that envelopment around and then a withdrawal and move through there. Why would they change if Ukraine is allowing them to do it again and again by moving up troops and resources somewhere else and then doing that? And that is very interesting. Let me know what you think of what he has said there, but there's nothing that I disagree with in that or the assessment from another experienced individual yesterday as well. So let's talk about the north and how Ukraine has reinforced and taken back some areas in here. So no changes on this map today. We have a little bit of footage of how Vovchansk is looking. So over the best part of a week, we can see the absolute destruction of everything in here. This is what happens when you're dropping massive artillery, multiple launch rocket systems, fabs, and street-to-street fighting. Everything gets battle-scarred incredibly quickly. But let's have a look on then the Syriac map here. And this lines up with other maps I've seen today, but we typically don't use. But situation, northeastern front. During the last 4 days, Ukraine army was able to regroup and re-enter the Vovchansk area north of the Vovcha River. So down through, we can see where the Vovcha runs by this blue way here. And we have seen maps having arrows of this pointing back in of where Ukraine has re-entered. This area was not actually secured by the Russian army, although it was declared under their control after the Ukrainian withdrawal. So people were claiming that Ukraine did withdraw to the south of the Vovcha River. The front lines lies between these streets. So you can see on this map, these are actually the closest they've been now for a while. Syriac is still showing more Russian control, but this Ukrainian re-entry and blue zone to try and push back into Vovchansk and have now a bridgehead on now the north side of here and fight street fighting back through on this front line. But the question needs to be, how many and who has redeployed into here to make this happen if Russia still is trying to focus down in the east? Regardless, Sursky has spoken about this in his update only a few hours ago. I continue my work in parts of the Eastern Front. After the first minor successes in the course of offensive fighting in Kharkiv region, I'd say there was a lot of success if you gained this much territory in under a week, but the opponent was completely engaged in the street fighting for Vovchansk and suffered very high losses. In the personnel of assault units, at the moment, the enemy from different directions is overthrowing reserves, trying to support active assault actions, but unsuccessfully. So saying that the Russians, by they, are bogged down in Vovchansk and suffering very high losses. But this ties into what the other people have been telling me, these guys by my chats, saying, yeah, there's so much focus on inflicting such high losses, but you're going to have the same of that continually reinforcing to try and fight in urban areas without your built-up defensive works. Should there be a bit of a trade for time, for a bit of land, and some more strikes in areas of which is better for you to be fighting in? So it is interesting here. I've seen a lot of people say there's too much focus on inflicting just very high losses in one area because we don't know what losses are being created on then the other side to then inflict those two. But there's still very little footage actually coming out in Vovchansk as well. So we can't have a good estimation of how many troops have actually been poured into here then either way. So let's move our way down the front line and see. So we've seen no change up in the north here on any of the maps for a while. We'll come down into the Kremenar front, Bilohorivka here. It is said that Ukraine made back a little bit of ground here, not being shown on then the deep state today, but during the last 6 days, Ukraine Army managed to recapture some positions north of Bilohorivka, so just up in this pocket here, saying some positions were then made back. Now we'll just move down to the south a little bit. We'll look at Bilohorivka, sort of Mark II, Vimimka, Vasily, Rozdolivka here as well. That'll give us an idea of where we are then looking. So we'll zoom in one more, then you'll see Ivano-Darivka. So just in this direction here that it said Russia has made a bit of ground as well, out from Vasily, taking high ground, trying to get down into Rozdolivka. New advance to southwest of Sperny and north of Vasily. Currently, Russian forces are trying to recapture trench system located at the heights that overlook Rozdolivka from the northeast. So that's said to be an advancement there, but we haven't got any confirmation from other sources then giving us that. And move our way down. Here we have Bakhmut, and the first of areas we will then be looking at. So no changes shown on this map, although we do know there are a lot of claims in here. So the big area here to talk about is the break-in and attempt to get into then Chasiv Yar, as we have seen Russian tanks working around here and combat teams in and around here as well, fighting Russians. So the grey zone should be significantly more in this area from what I have seen. Now, let's have a look at some geolocated footage, I guess, off the bat first. So this is into Chasiv Yar. Now, these are Russian armoured vehicles with troops on top moving in here. There you can see the amount of artillery dropping here. You can see that this armoured vehicle back here, unidentifiable from the space, is firing as well and firing into these areas as well as the other one up here, sort of doing a sort of an open maneuver on themselves. I'm not sure how much support is actually being given from other elements here, but you can see firing into these first buildings here. Now, we'd have some geolocations of where this is lining up, and we'll look on the maps as well. So just take into account this L-shaped building, and this is said to be TOS dropping in here, at least from the post that I saw. You can see multiple launches into here, hitting targeted areas. Now, this is taken, I presume, at different times of the day. You don't want to be firing this in on your own bloody guys. But let's have a look at some geolocations. Let's go onto a Google map and actually have a look at this. So L-shaped building, 2 buildings here. So that's where we see some of that ordnance being dropped. And of course, this is just into Chasiv Yar here down this roadway. So let's line up where this guy is saying. So first off the bat, let's look at this one. This is the armoured vehicles moving in, of course, down this road. Now, this is the position of where we see them. So when we see them split out, it is a split up. These are then the 2 buildings that we speak about of where these vehicles split and are firing onto, we presume, Ukrainian positions in then these 2 buildings, which sit just here. So the grey zone definitely should be extended probably all the way out here. So we see that push in here. And then we will see where that TOS after was landing. So we see, I'll just move this map across, L-shaped building, which is, I believe, this building then here. You can see the other L back behind it, as well as then the double building here. But this has had the middle taken down, I believe, there too. You can see better just on this map of how it's going to be looking and where that TOS is landing in these positions there. So definitely, if TOS is landing in here, probably should be seen as grey zone. But interesting to see the footage and how the tactics will be working in there. Infantry riding it on top and then backing up positions or on assault here also. So let's have a look at what then Syriac is showing. During the last days, Russian army made new advances on the dashes north of the Canal microdistrict. Clashes with Ukrainian army continue along the railway and the eastern part of Kalina. So just up to the north of where we're looking, some movements and clashes, but movements made in the center of Chasiv Yar here, which we know on this southern area, that's where we saw those tanks operating and firing in, and where we see those troops working as well. So we don't know the actual outcome of that, but that's what we are then seeing from geolocated stuff. Kishlivka here, we can see well down out of here, Russian army fully secure the village of Andrivka as Ukrainian army continue towards the water canal. So we did see that Syriac did claim Klishkivka fully came under Russian control, and now saying that Andrivka has as well, with the Ukrainian pushback across the water canal here. That said, we're not sure. We haven't seen any geolocations of that or any Ukrainian claims of that happening then either. So let's move a little bit further down. We don't have anything across in this area, but we then do have Oshodetny to Kedemik sort of front this movement of territory here being confirmed. And we have spoken about, other maps show that this is then, we have spoken about, and other maps show this as closed off, which we may have been incorrect on, because we do have some geolocated footage here showing a Russian assault onto this area. So we can see, I can't show you this, it'll be on the Telegram as always, but these are Russian troops here. This is one of the first times in the entire war I've actually seen some reasonable spacing between guys, that if a grenade were to drop somewhere, it won't take out all of you. But then an assault up onto then a trench system here, spaced out, coming in, and then a movement into this area. Can't show you much more of this, but this is then geolocated to right here. So we have Oshodetny, we have these two tree lines meeting, and then I'll show you. So on this map, we have right in here. So I will say that likely this map has updated off that geolocated footage of what we've seen, judging by they're in then the same locations. But that is the only changes on then this map today. But never fear, I've got more for you. So let's talk then about Ulmansky and this Netelyove front here, an area of which we have spoken about, like my guy said, about changing tactics and trying to surround things that we may be seeing again. This is off Naval reports. He shows significantly different from then the deep state map here, this closing up of Ulmansky, and you can see it even says outside of where the grey zone is. So see where this intersection is, that basically out to where the point of the grey zone is, all the way down, then this road has been closed up. As we do know, there was geolocated footage right up around this direction. My cursor is from now a couple of weeks back of Russian forces, but saying there is a large change in advancement there. And we have then Syriac map showing basically the exact same up past that intersection in Urmansk as well. So definitely showing there was an advancement in this direction. Now let's push down to the south a little bit. We'll talk about Krasnoyarivka. Haven't seen much movement in here as of how hot it was at some point, but Syriac's just showing a little bit out to the west here too, but very similar to now what the deep state is showing around these last areas on the west. So nothing too major different shown there. Then we'll come down Madiinka, not seeing any changes. Novomyalivka, this is where we do see some Syriac changes today. So, of course, showing more control out into Paraskovskia as well. Here, the Russian army made small advances southwest of Novomyalivka, and what we presume is trying to push down from Novomyalivka, Paraskovskia, Konstantinivka, and make their way down here. And what we have spoken about is the danger down in like the Ugledar pocket. So Ugledar down here, if Russia is able to sort of skip between these, this open ground is very vulnerable to then fire control too. So interesting to look at what will actually occur there. But of course, when you get extended like that, you are opening yourself at risk of being cut off. Now, Uruzani, we did see some changes in here from this map maybe a week or more ago. We are seeing some changes then today. So Starmaorsky area, this is where that red dot is. So right up in this front, but these aren't actually too dissimilar from each other, just a little bit more on the north. But again, nothing too dissimilar. Russian army made new advances in Starmorsky, taking control of 40% of the locality. In addition, new advances were made by Russian troops adjacent to the road towards Rivnopol. So Rivnopol down in this vicinity here. We will see what then happens here as well. Robotny, I'll give you one guess of what we've seen here. No changes, but of course, this is where the maps don't line up the most from NOAA reports, Syriac maps, War Mapper, all are showing. Well, most show more similar to this of Robotny's control, but Deep State isn't, and Deep State, I guess, is sort of the official map. Zap front, during the last 2 days, Russian army made new advances northwest of Verbova, taking control of a series of trenches by the Ukrainian army. So, of course, these are incredibly hard to line up because it just doesn't show the same picture, but right out into this front sort of horn area here. But we know that down amongst this front and, of course, Robotny itself, showing just incredibly different what the maps are. So that'll be the end of the mapping. Let's talk about China and Russia. We have spoken about that this war pushes global east and global south further together through sanctions, not only on Russia, sanctions on China, sanctions on other countries. We have seen that, and we have seen those sanctions not work as well as people predicted then they would. So the Secretary of Defense, Grant Shapps, talked about this then yesterday. In addition, in my Lancaster House speech, I warned that the world had moved from a post-war into a pre-war era. So post-major wars, we're back in pre-war. The axis of authoritarian states led by China, Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea have escalated and fueled conflicts and tensions. I think everyone's fueling a bit of everything. They have increasingly been working together. Of course, we've pushed them together. We've, of course, pushed them together because you've sanctioned them, won't do trade with them, so they won't bring you closer to you. It pushes them further together. And today, I can reveal that we have evidence that Russia and China are collaborating on combat equipment for use in Ukraine. As we saw from Putin's state visit to Beijing and 64% growth in trade between Russia and China since the full-scale invasion, they are covering each other's back. But this isn't some distant problem. So saying there is combat equipment being collaborated for use in Ukraine. Has it being used? What is it? Is Russia buying equipment? Is it tanks being used? We know it's not that. Is it transistors and microelectronics being used through items, dual use stuff? Most likely. But we do know if China was to enter and help on the industrial capacity, that would solve a lot of problems for Russia of just making shells. The amount of stuff China can make is unbelievable. But Jake Sullivan from the US sort of did push back on this. Well, going back to 2022, I've actually stood on this podium and warned about my concern that China might provide weapons, direct lethal assistance to Russia. We didn't see it in 22. We didn't see it in 23. We have not seen that to date. I would look forward to speaking with the UK to make sure that we have a common operating picture. We have had one. We've been on the same page. So I just want to understand better what exactly that comment was referring to. What I would point out is that just recently, we have been articulating in quite urgent terms our concern about what China is doing to fuel Russia's war machines. Not giving weapons directly, but providing inputs to Russia's defense industrial base. That is happening. That is something we're concerned about. We've taken action to deal with that in a consulted way with our allies and partners, and you can expect more of that action in the period ahead. And this is where a lot of people speak about that if you just sanction the shit out of someone, then if you give them then nothing to lose, then they'll look for other areas without caring about that. You need to give something to lose, and therefore, well, if you do that, we'll do this. And if the sanctions aren't working, you're pushing a lot of these countries together, and it's not just those countries you speak about. A lot of countries are getting pushed together, and a rise of control in other areas in the south and east, especially in third world nations as well, who are looking for a change from what influence the West has been putting there. We will see a large change, and what I think we'll see more of a multipolar world than a unipolar world. And I think many analysts would agree on that who are unbiased. Legends, look after yourselves. Sorry this one was long, but I'll speak to you tomorrow. Thank you.